how do you think that these, the anti-gravity technology that's using gravity as a power source, how is that happening? Do you have a brief explanation on?
I really think it's gravity control and gravity wave control. As for a power source, I think the power source was better described as this quantum vacuum energy or zero-point energy. But it's like two separate things but are related. So you can have a zero-point energy system or a free energy system. It doesn't move and it's not affecting gravity, but at a certain resonant frequency and power, and has to do with vortices, toroidal energy patterns, you can then cause what I call mass cancellation, where an object literally takes on weightlessness. Now, if you go back in the documentary, we touch on this, all the way back to T. Townsend Brown, and what was later called the B-Phil-Brown effect. In the late 1920s, he took a very high voltage system at a very certain, with wires around a crystalline material, and it levitated, just floated. Now, that was almost 100 years ago, late 20s. That was then the Kautsky-Frost experiment in Germany, around the same time, confirmed it. Later, the whole B-Phil-Brown effect, studying very high voltage VHV systems, began to be increasingly studied and classified in the 30s and 40s. By the time World War II ended, Adolf Hitler had a disc-shaped electrogravitic, but it wasn't stable, which is why he could never use it in the war. But it was brought back to America by Paul Mellon and General Patton and Allen Dulles. So that device actually became a very important object to study at the end of World War II. And of course, that technology got advanced greatly by studying the extraterrestrial materials that we also were beginning to acquire by using electromagnetic weapons to down the ET craft. So you had two rivers of technology being developed from the 20s, 30s, 40s that intersected with the extraterrestrial technologies, and they hybridized them.
Shit.
So that's what happened between 1945 and 55, that decade.
How many different ways do you think how many different ways are there to harness this kind of energy?
Oh, I think there are dozens.
How did Tesla do it?
Tesla, I think, was actually capturing resonant magnetic field energy of the Earth that's almost boundless. So there are a lot of, quote, free energy approaches. I think the ones that use these very high voltage systems that create a sort of a vector, a tap, as it were, into this quantum vacuum energy and zero-point energy field, those began to be stumbled across, but sort of episodically as a phenomenon back in the late 1800s, because that was the heyday when they were first discovering electromagnetism. And I think Maxwell and Faraday, some of these guys stumbled across this, but they didn't know what it was. You were getting more energy out than you had to put in. So I think you can have a rotational coil-based device. Floyd Sweet, who we feature in the movie, had a solid-state device that was about this big that could run a 300 horsepower electric engine for your car. No other batteries, the little teeny...
you had video of that.
We have video of it. It was tested by a lieutenant colonel, Tom Bearden, who's a very dear friend of mine, just passed away. He handed off all of what he knew about this to us. We have a file that was a CIA operative named Sajaki that I knew, but he had a guy I know named John Bedini, who was allowed to copy a bunch of confiscated patents, and we have that disk. So we need to send up a research lab to do this and get to the bottom of it, I think, Shawn, very quickly, because we need to do it. Look, if this technology came out in the next year or two by a group that could just put it out, open source it, thousands of companies would then adopt it, and we'd be able to really transform the trajectory of the planet. Now, there are going to be certain losers in that process. Like any new technology, oil, gas, coal, centralized public utilities, they'll all have to be retired. But keep in mind, it's going to take 15 years to do this. You know, your car and my car running, if you have a conventional vehicle, 100 million vehicles are made a year. There are 1.5 billion motor vehicles on the road worldwide. Mm-hmm. That's 15 years if you waved a magic wand and converted every manufacturing entity to a zero-point electric system. That's not going to happen. So, you know, it's going to take a couple of decades to make this transition anyway. It should have happened 100 years ago.
Why do you think so many UFOs spottings are happening around these nuclear sites?
Well, we know the answer to that. And of course, he didn't get to go into it, but Lieutenant Colonel Heckert, who was the U-2 pilot who was there, he dealt specifically with this information, dealing with the extraterrestrial concern over nuclear facilities. And it's multiple reasons. One, they're very concerned that we would actually do something that could threaten the life of biological life on Earth. Obviously, mutual assured destruction would do that. And believe it or not, these civilizations are very positively concerned with the human future. But they're also secondarily, maybe equally, concerned about containing the warlike nature of humans from being exported out into space. Now, the nuclear issue, when you detonate a nuclear device or there's an accident, everyone knows what an EMP is. We've talked about electromagnetic pulse. There's also a type of scalar pulse that goes out that literally rips through space-time, that disrupts interstellar communication and travel. This is why, you know, I was talking to Gordon Crichton, who is an MI6 guy and a military intelligence guy in the United Kingdom, who's passed away, but he's one of our witnesses. He used to publish Flying Saucer Review that Prince Charles and Prince Philip subscribed to. Interesting. But what he said was basically when we did that, at the first atomic bomb explosion, it actually was like kicking a hornet's nest, because now Edward Teller and Oppenheimer, they didn't know that when one of those things would go off, that it would create this kind of pulse, not electromagnetic pulse, but this other wave that actually goes through the entangled cosmos in a way that is highly disruptive to other civilizations, communications, and travel. So this began to be a huge red flag went up over the Earth. Warning, this is a group of, primitive, emerging civilization that is a threat to themselves and a threat to others out there. They don't even know what a big threat this is. So the whole nuclear issue is what caused the modern era of UFO, ET-related events to take place, because I think they've obviously been watching the Earth and been involved in seeing its development for millennia. There's good evidence for that. I mean, there are cave drawings from 5,000 years ago that have been carbon dated to that age that show a classic disc and look like ET beings outside of it from France and India and all over. So I don't think it's not as if they didn't know we were here. It's that when we hit that point, and what they really were trying to get Truman and Eisenhower to do, the ETs, were to wind that down and go on a different trajectory, which is what we're recommending now, 60 years later. And that is to pivot to getting rid of this conflict-oriented endless war scenario with these kind of weapons and move towards a peaceful solution to our conflicts, but then begin to adopt these technologies so that human civilization can advance without cannibalizing the Earth and killing off the oceans. So I think this is something that we took a pass on. It was a tragic error. The big error happened on here. I'm just be honest with you. Pretty much the year I was born, ironically, 1955 to 57. This whole enterprise went sideways. And when Eisenhower subsequently lost control over these deep black operations, that's when he gave the beware the military-industrial complex. I mean, he was very pro-military. He was a general, World War II. And then, of course, that's why also the first director, one of the early directors, CIA, 1947, when the CIA was founded, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter stated in a letter to the New York Times after Eisenhower gave that speech, and he said, the secrecy around UFOs is a threat to the national security. He didn't say the UFOs were. He said the secrecy around it is a threat to the national security. So when people ask me, are the UFOs a threat to the national security? I said the man-made ones absolutely are. The extraterrestrial ones aren't. But the secrecy around it in its aggregate is a dire threat to world and national security, no question.
In the documentary, you talk about some of the UFO technology. The metal is so pure it cannot be replicated. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we think, if you're driving a car or flying on a Boeing 737 or whatever, we dig that stuff up, aluminum and metal. We smelt it, refine it, roll it, put it together, rivets, welding, etc. An extraterrestrial vehicle and all its components are not made that way. They are made by creating a sort of an ultrasonic, very high-tech wave that pulls, let's call it the substrate, the elementals that are subatomic, together on, if you can visualize this, like almost like a blueprint in energy, and it materializes it. So it's seamless. Even the parts that are in it, anything that's energy or electronic related, is on a nanomolecular level entwined in it. But this is why it's very hard to study this stuff. I mean, it's not like taking apart a Soviet MiG or something. I know the men who worked on these projects, and I mean, you're dealing with really extraordinary, elegant, beautiful material sciences and matter. And that's why the materials are so pure, because they're not dug up and refined. They're actually assembled from this baseline energy-matter interface in space-time. And make it real for you. There was a captain on a Navy contract vessel back in 62 or 3, and before he died, he contacted me. Great guy. And he had been, they were testing the Atlas rockets for intercontinental ballistic, but these didn't have nukes on them. They were testing the rocket and guidance systems way back. And they had a lot of UFO sightings because the ETs were watching how we were developing in kind of this breakout speed with thermonuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic, Cold War. And one night, they had an object on radar. It was triangulated. They had it on ship radar. So the captain has this guy say, hey, look, we have this boogie. And then it got confirmed from the command center. And they said, because they were able to do that, unfortunately, they triangulated it, and it was hit with some kind of weapon. This was 63. And it dropped, boom, like a rock right into the South Atlantic Ocean. So he was vectored over to the estimated point of impact and was there to retrieve it. And I have his whole story. And he never wanted to come forward because even when he had to have surgery once, they had an intelligence guy in there when he was under anesthesia to be sure he didn't talk about this. But I have his whole information. So what happened is that when he got to the site, there was about a 6x6 pod, and they pulled it up on the ship. And it wasn't the whole craft. The whole craft had gone down, but apparently there was some sort of one molded thing, and there were 4, I'm going to use his language, little men that look like the color of a Sicilian, kind of brown, but 39 inches tall, no hair, and also no external ears, no pinna, flaps, very fine featured. But the reason he contacted me, and this is why this is so funny, I've debriefed over 1,000 men like this. He said, I can't figure out how they got in and out of their uniforms. So they had a one-piece uniform. Now, no zipper and no buttons and no visible way they could get them out of this thing. And he says, how do they put them on? I said, well, they don't need a zipper or a button because they are kind of materialized around them and then dematerialized off using this technology, this very advanced trans-dimensional physics. And he went, oh, my God, I would have never dreamed. I said, no, I mean, it's how they're doing it. So this is why people who encounter an actual ET craft or the EBENs, extraterrestrial biological entities, and they see even their clothing, none of it tracks because it's so far advanced.
Well, you know, there was another, maybe, I can't remember if it was one or two of the whistleblowers that spoke about this. They spoke about, or maybe it was you talking about it, but when they got into the craft, the inside of the craft seemed almost infinite.
Yep, that was one of my. I was representing a whistleblower who is not ready to be unmasked yet. He still doesn't want to be known publicly. But yes, because you have a dimensional space shift as well. So an object that looks 30 feet across, you go in, and it was so big, you could, if you'd thrown a football, you couldn't hit the other side of it. So, you know, again, all of this gets into an understanding of physics that, unfortunately, you know, we're not teaching our kids the real physics, the science of anything. I mean, we're all locked 100 years. This is the other part of the lost century I talk about, is that it has to do with medical technologies. I mean, as a doctor, I've seen some things that, oh my God, if we had that, the lives that could be saved. Spinal cord regeneration of lost limbs.
You've seen this stuff?
Yeah. At an underground lab on the Mexican-Texas border. Yeah. Sad. Yeah.
How were you getting access to this?
The people who like what I'm trying to do, that are in the system, take me. And I went to one place, a very funny story, and they had, they had the Marines there. You know, there was all these checkpoints, and the guy said, finally we got to the last one. And this was a facility, I won't say where it was, but I mean, basically World War III for all submarines to be run out of there. And my escort, my military advisor, finally we got to this last point where you go into the inner, it's this huge place, deep. And the guy goes, and what is Dr. Greer here for? And he says, you don't have a need to know. So he played the same need to know thing. So I went in. So beyond full disclosure, I've never worked for the government or a contractor. I have no clearances. I don't want a clearance. But there are people who know that what we're doing, we're fighting the good fight. And the people in the system, a lot of them are very good people. This is what a lot of people need to understand. They got trapped in a system where you get read into more and more of these compartments. Next thing you know, you're in something. And the guys, as I say this, I want to make a call for more whistleblowers watching to come out. There are guys out there watching your show, Delta Force, Navy SEAL, people in aerospace industry, various military commands that have dealt with or seen this, and they need to come forward because now there's a safe pathway for them to do it. And if you're corporate, now there's a 6-month clock on you. And we let me be very clear. We know who you are and where your assets are. And after those 6 months, you're subject to criminal prosecution, and you'll be lucky if that's all you're subject to. So this is getting very serious right now. That's why I'm on your show.
There's a 6-month window.
Yep.
When does that expire?
From the date this bill is finally signed. I mean, it's out of committee, it's going to be voted, and then it's an amendment to the intelligence bill.
Okay, so it's not actually, we're not wrapped up with that
No,
yet.
it's done. It's pretty much, it's done.
But it's not in effect yet.
I'll have to ask my guy who's shepherding it through.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it is, actually.
Let's talk about the secret air show in 1988.
Norton, yeah, Air Force Base. It's a decommissioned Air Force Base, California, where there was the original ARV that we learned about. Apparently, it had mercury component parts from 1959, 60 time period. And it was sort of a circular object, came up to it like a cupola. You see the drawings we have. And we have a man who was at that air show who described it in full. It had scorch marks and other things on it, and they had been told at this secret air show that it in fact had been out in the solar system, out into space and back. This is late 1950s, early 1960s. Now, ironically, my uncle who worked on the lunar module, put the first man on the moon, that was 1969. So they're working one track at Grumman, which became Northrop Grumman, but then in these deep black projects, they have these things that are zipping out there. And that is 100% true. My understanding, it did not have interstellar capability. It did not have teleportation capability. It didn't have any of that really exotic. But it was a energy, free energy combined with anti-gravity, where they could get that up there and go out into space and other places. So that air show was basically showing some old antique ones, right? This is 1988. This bird was from the late 50s, early 60s. And they had three of them. One was about 25 feet, I believe, 150, and one 100 feet across. Now, Mr. Herrera, by the time he was in, 2009, whenever it was, in Indonesia, that one was 300 feet across, man-made. Think of it. Think of the length of a football field round, floating.
How are you able to tell which one of these are man-made versus ET?
At a great distance, you would know. If you're up close enough, the man-made ones are going to have components, protrusions, electromagnetic, often. They're going to be seams, welding marks. Underneath, there could be pipes and other things. It's very clearly a man-made machine. The extraterrestrial ones, seamless. They're extruded in this process of how they create them. Even the light they give off is very different because it's coming through such pure material science, extremely pure materials. And then if you
we're still in the infancy stages we're still in the infancy stages of this compared to.
I'm afraid in 2023, we're certainly not in infancy. We have technologies and material science that are far beyond. Look at what Stephen Digna talked about, that Raytheon device. Out of 1 million people who would have seen or touched that thing, 1 million of them would have said it was extraterrestrial. No one would have thought we had that kind of technology. AI, organic quality to it. That, if you look at his testimony carefully, but that's how they've been getting away with doing the abductions, the quote alien abduction hoax. The way they've been able to do it is have technologies and also creatures that look like they're gray or reptilian or whatever. I know men who've worked on them, actually fabricated them. Those are man-made. And they're used for their psychological warfare purpose. This is one thing I would love to get Dr. Jacques Vallée to release this document he has from 1985. It's a CIA official document, and it describes the CIA conducting abductions, alien abductions in Brazil and Argentina, quote, for their psychological warfare value. Now, this is now, almost 40 years ago, 38 years ago. So those sort of projects, aside from being a crime in any jurisdiction anywhere on the planet, and a crime against humanity, is creating this false flag psychology, the preparation, because people are brainwashed thinking the aliens are mutilating and the aliens are abducting us. They have no need to do that. That's this disinformation campaign using incredibly high-tech technologies that we've studied from the extraterrestrials. So this is one of the real problems, is that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And this was my concern when David Grush started talking about an event where, the aliens were murdering people. I'm going, and that went all through Capitol Hill. I'm going, I know that incident. That was us. So people, and I don't think he understands, because he's a young man, the problem of having a little bit of information on this and thinking you know a lot is that you're going to step into a booby trap. And the booby trap is being played by the very unconstitutional criminals that people like him were trying to uncover.
You were working with Grush, correct?
We had met in March of 2022 in Culpeper, Virginia. I was asked to meet with him, but And he had a security guy there with him. And I told him, look, I'll cooperate and get you anything you need. And so over about a 14-month period, until he told me he was leaving the U.S. government in April of this year, we would, periodically, occasionally we spoke through an encrypted system. Usually it was encrypted texts. But I have all these.
This is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the guy that he was just in the news?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he came out that there was a downed craft. We retrieved it with bodies, correct?
Yes. And those were a lot of this information I was providing to his bosses. And then he was in a field operation to go out and get to places. Now, he never got in to see it firsthand, but he talked to people, of course, that knew about it.
I mean, this actually hit the mainstream media, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, he's not the principal person I've been dealing with. The principal person would be the equivalent of a 2 or 3-star general if he was still in the military. But I think that, my goal in all of this is that if someone is trying to do this on behalf of the legal government of the United States, I will give them any information I have. But we have a lot. I mean, our repository of intelligence on this by far is the largest in the world, certainly exceeds the legal government of the United States. I will say that for a fact. Now, my concern is that when you go from that to then falling into the clutches of folks in the UFO community, who then start giving you these tall tales of all these horrible things the aliens have been doing, I'm going, yes, but you haven't been read in to that part of the project. So this is like an onion, a stinking onion. You peel 500 layers of this onion back, and there's 500 more. And this is where a little bit of just superficial knowledge is a very dangerous thing, extremely dangerous. And my concern about that is that this is exactly the game that's going to be run on Congress and the White House.
Well, I mean, you're already seeing it. I mean, like I said, look, I don't trust the mainstream media. Anyways.
Well, no, they're an asset of this group.
But
absolutely,
a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't put any legitimacy on anything unless Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, unless they touch it. Nobody.
Right.
I'm not going to say nobody because there's a growing. The population that doesn't believe in the mainstream media is just continuously getting larger.
It's probably half the population. Yeah.
But why do you think? I mean, that would be the biggest story in the world. Mm-hmm. We've recovered an ET craft with bodies, and on every news network they're all covering it, and then just like that, it's gone. No photos, no nothing. What happened? Why do you think it just disappeared?
Well, we know why. I mean, in 2001, when we did the first National Press Club event, we had a guy who was on a team that for several years in the 60s retrieved the bodies and the craft. And he spoke, and he had all of his information there. His name is Sergeant Clifford Stone. He's in our archive. Go look at it. So the people we just had at the National Press Club, a decorated U-2 pilot who encountered these objects back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, worked at the Lockheed operations and skunk work interface with Ben Rich directly, personally. He didn't get to go into that. But these guys are all available to give testimony. These are firsthand. David Grush was secondhand. He never was principally involved. Stephen Digna, was with 2 Raytheon guys with these man-made Raytheon devices. D.C. Long was in an underground facility out on the Range 19 with some Delta guys, took his dad in, who was a contractor, and they accidentally saw this system levitating a 100-ton concrete block up in the air, along with some giant boulders. Absolutely true. And we had people who were, at other operations that we brought. Now, those are all every one of our 750 Disclosure Project folks are firsthand witnesses, meaning that they weren't people trying to find out like David Grush was. They're people who actually were in there. Interesting that the media won't interview them.
It is.
Though, if they really want to know the truth, why would you want to talk to a field operator who didn't have firsthand information and skip over the people who actually touched the things, saw them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the public has to ask the question very quickly. How do we get the truth out? I think we're asking everyone to write their member of Congress and their 2 senators and the White House as an activist responsibility as a citizen of the United States and refer to the National Press Club event and the Disclosure Project archive, because we've sent all this in, and say, now we need to see action taken. Now, whether the media, the corporate media, that's, I honestly believe is controlled by this same corrupt enterprise.
I mean, Doc, they're definitely controlled. I mean, there's multiple videos of them all reporting the exact same shit. I mean,
Right.
It's ridiculous that anybody even watches it anymore.
Well, I mean, it's staged. And the problem with that, they do have, and this is the other big announcement, if there are any attorneys listening, we now have over 150 attorneys and legal professionals on our legal team. And not only will they protect and defend any whistleblowers and the project, but they also we're moving quickly towards issuing a civilian RICO, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization lawsuit. Who are going to be in the target? All these corporations and individuals. You can't use a civilian RICO against a government agency, but you can target the individuals and the corporations. That we are going to be doing in concert with this bill, saying now you need to come in and out of the cold, or you'll be criminally. We can't criminally prosecute, but there is a U.S. attorney who's on the team that when we find actionable intelligence and get it introduced into court in a civilian RICO, he would then take it and see if he can pursue it under a criminal statute.
I got another question, and the question is,
Great people have come forward in the last few months. Yeah.
you've had, I don't even know how many different whistleblowers have contacted you guys, and you know, if you're not looking at this with a skeptical eye for anybody, that's
right.
listening, you should be.
Yeah, you
How
should.
are you deciphering who the legitimate whistleblowers are from the quacks?
First of all, we asked for them to give evidence of who they were, where they were. We want to see a DD-214. We want to see records, and then we check them out. And there's someone who's in our team who has the ability to check them out through the system.
Okay.
Now, even with that, you could be tricked. The best I can do, now remember, we're not the U.S. government with trillions of dollars or the Pentagon with $700 billion. We're a volunteer organization, best we can do. But the other thing is because I've debriefed legitimate people for 30 years on this, literally over 1,000 people. Not all of them are in the archive because some of them never wanted their names given to me, but they were legit. So what I say is that if the story doesn't track, and and the other is if what they're sharing comports with the evidence from another source, but they don't know each other, there's no collusion. So then you say, okay, this gentleman in 1980 saw this. This guy in 2009 saw this. And it was essentially the same kind of operation, craft, what have you. They don't know each other. But they're very reluctant. They say, you're not going to believe this. This is what they all say. I said, trust me, I'll probably believe it. But then when you get a points of corroboration, so what I try to do is find multiple points of corroboration.
Okay.
Like we had like a dozen people who knew about the ET concerns, about the nuclear issue. So there's a whole area of multiple points of corroboration. And it's particularly useful when it's a similar event or company or facility, base, where they were there at different times and don't know each other. So then you don't have someone being able to match up their stories in some tall tale. So I have my own approach to this.
Okay.
But obviously we don't have at this point. Now the difference is that when we launch this RICO, civilian RICO action, we'll have subpoena power and also discovery. So we can go to these spaces. Now we'll have to find a federal judge who will certify it. We'll see.
I'm glad we went through that because, I mean, it is, it's tough to take somebody's word for things like this. And so
I
think
don't.
it's important to.
I do the best I can. Now, we almost were tricked by a guy back in 1997 who was coming to the briefings I set up for Congress back then, offsite at the Westin Hotel in Georgetown. And Edgar Mitchell was there. A bunch of fun people were there. And it turned out he was telling a tall tale. And my military advisor at that time was at a bar, and he started talking about stuff that this guy knew absolutely was false. So I had him escorted off the premises. So, you basically get one bite at the apple with us at telling something that ends up to be nonsense. So that's kind of our policy. But we, because we don't have any kind of significant, our budget for all of this has been volunteers and a few donations and people who are devoted to it. So we can do only what we can do with the assets we have.
Well, you got a lot of assets. I mean, we talked about your crowdfunding capabilities earlier, and those are quite impressive.
Right.
So
yeah, we do the best we can, you know. But I always tell people I'm confident of the ones that we're putting forward and of the ones we have in the archive, which have not come forward. And listen, anyone listening, you can come forward and only give information to me that you think is useful. If you want to go to the Arrow process and be protected under the new law and give your testimony, we can do that. If you want to come out publicly, we can do that. It's really up to the person to determine if they were in special forces or a Lockheed scientist or whatever, how they want to do it. We just want as many people to come forward because there's strength in numbers. But here's the other thing, Shawn, we really need. We need to continue to grow the current state-of-the-art knowledge of where facilities are, operations, code numbers, code names, all that. Because that's how the investigators, and if necessary, people who will by force, if necessary, get these projects under control. That's what they need to have.
Well, all the ways to contact you for the whistleblowers and anybody wanting to get involved to volunteer are linked below.
Great.